Hello everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the County Seat. I'm your host Chad Booth. We are bringing you our show from the Capitol. It is during the legislative session. Our topic today may in a tongue-in-cheek sort of fit here because the wolf is at the door, and that's how the legislature seems sometime if you've been by the legislative chamber when all the people are out there trying to catch the legislators. But we are going to seriously talk about the wolf in our program today. We have covered the northern gray wolf that was transplanted or reestablished in its population base down through Yellowstone, Wyoming, and has moved consistently south. It now flanks out on the northern part of Utah, and occasionally you'll get one that'll stray into the central part of the state. But the new wolf at the door is the Mexican wolf, which is a subspecies that has been native to central and northern Mexico, with an extended range placed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife to help it recover up into the center of Arizona. They are once again looking at expanding it and considering the possibility of making some of Utah part of that wolf's range. That will be the topic of our show today, but right now we're going to kind of go to Wolf 101 and find out a little bit more about the species.
Canis lupus, the gray wolf. 40,000 years ago, they roamed all over the northern hemisphere. By the 1950s, they were almost wiped out in the U.S. Wolves only have three known natural predators: tigers, people, and each other. Unlike other species who primarily kill for food and occasionally to protect their young, wolves will attack to protect their territory and to explore the defenses of a potential prey. This surplus killing means that the wolf attacks not to eat, but rather just to learn if the opponent is vulnerable. For centuries, civilization has tried to eradicate the wolf. It has really only been in the last few decades that the shift to conservation has come about. Shortly after the Endangered Species Act was passed in 1973, the gray wolf population was split into subspecies to assure that conservation efforts restored them to all historic ranges for the wolf. Most of them have done well in recovery. Today there are about 17,000 wolves in various areas of the U.S. and about 400,000 gray wolves worldwide. The smallest subspecies by size and number is the Mexican gray wolf, with a total population of about 350 animals. 90% of its original habitat was in the mountains of Mexico and only stretched into the U.S. along the Arizona and New Mexico border, shown in gray on the map. In 1996, the Fish and Wildlife Service artificially expanded the habitat range to include about half the area of Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, shown on your map in the lined area. That was to help the species recover. Now the Fish and Wildlife Service wants to expand that protected territory again into areas that have never had Mexican wolves, which includes southeastern Utah. What will that mean for Utah ranchers? We'll find out during the rest of the show.
Well, we'll get on to the conversation about our new wolf neighbor to the south, the Mexican wolf, and some of its recovery plans, what that might mean to Utah with our panel of experts when we come back on the County Seat.
There's a little place on a Utah map where I was raised, where my heart's at, where the sagebrush grows wild and high, and the stars come out at night. Oh, there ain't nothing like being raised in the basin with a Ute reservation, skiing starvation, that Duchesne County life.
149 million years in the making, dinosaurs once roamed this land. Now they're found at the Dinosaur National Monument. Let's take you beyond the bones. We call it Dinosaur Land. You'll find it offers adventures and sights not seen anywhere else in the world. Come to Dinosaur Land, Vernal, Utah. You'll want to stay forever. The dinosaurs did.
If you are looking for the center of the universe, good luck. But if you are looking for the center of the off-road universe, look no farther than Paiute County. Hundreds of miles of trails turn your day of riding into a week, a month, heck, a lifetime wouldn't be enough. Explore one of the most famous trail systems in the world, the Paiute Trail. Go rafting on the Sevier River or go boating and fishing at Otter Creek and Paiute Reservoir. Explore Paiute County and discover the magic and beauty of the land where the rainbow ends.
The weekends just never feel like they're long enough. By the time you get to a destination, you're worn out and you may need a vacation to recover from your last vacation. The solution is closer than you think, and that's just what you need. You can find the desert at Little Sahara, the cool refreshment of Yuba Lake, escape to the green of the forest on the Nebo Loop. Make your escape to Juab County. It'll change your family forever.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking today about wolves. It's a topic we haven't covered for a couple of years. Last time we addressed this issue, we had with us one of our panel members today, Commissioner Bill Cox from Rich County. Also joining us is Greg Sheehan, who is the #1 guy down at the Division of Wildlife Resources for the state. Guys, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
So we now have, 2 decades ago, the talk was Canadian gray wolf, we need to reintroduce it, get it back into the Rockies, and they started the introduction program. Not much conversation happened on the Mexican wolf, but obviously they started a forced recovery program on the Mexican wolf. And so a guy sitting in his armchair at home goes, well, I thought a wolf was a wolf. Is there a difference between a Mexican wolf and the Canadian gray other than their visas?
Yes, there is certainly. These northern gray wolves exist and persist throughout Alaska, Canada, and far up north. So the ones that were introduced back in the 1990s in the Yellowstone ecosystem were kind of a lower reaching branch of that species. There is a subspecies, this Mexican wolf, that really historically evolved in the country of Mexico. So they kind of don't really overlap. At times they may have briefly touched and had a little bit of interchange that way, but certainly these are different. This northern wolf really is not an endangered species by any stretch. Again, there are tens of thousands of those. The Mexican wolf, you've got 100 to 120-ish Mexican wolves in the wild, and a couple times that in captive breeding facilities.
So, there are guys that are in ranching, they're in wildlife management, they're sportsmen, and southern Utah, the Four Corners area is their base. And so they're looking at this impending arrival of an expanded territory for these Mexican wolves. And you've lived through it as the gray wolf was introduced down out of the north. What kind of impact did that have on Rich County and the hunting and the grazing and all those different things up there?
Well, as it started to migrate, supposedly it wasn't going to get down into Rich County, but it was part of the management area. And as it started to migrate, we started seeing wolves and we started seeing signs, and once it was a sighting here and there, and occasionally we would find some livestock that had been killed, or maybe some wildlife that had been killed, but it wasn't conclusive as to whether it was a wolf kill or not. Then we started seeing wolves. And over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, there's been a lot more prominence in the depredation of what the wolves have been doing between sheep and livestock. One not very long ago was caught in a trapper's snare. Still being determined as to whether it was a hybrid or was actually a purebred northern wolf. But we're starting to see that presence. They are migrating down into Utah. Fortunately, in Rich County, they're part of the management area, and they can be shot if they are doing damage. And it would be, but they don't know the difference between the freeway and not. And so if they cross the freeway and move down into the central part of the state, then there's a whole different set of regulations in order to be able to shoot a wolf or take the wolf out of the circumstances they're in. So yeah, we're seeing them. And if you introduce them from the southern part of the state and they come from the northern part of the state, we're going to have them, and then we're going to say, well, is it a Mexican wolf or is it the northern gray wolf? Which one is it? Because they're going to be managed with 2 different sets of management policies, because one's reintroduced and one is back in their natural habitat.
Well, that kind of leads to all kinds of questions. I mean, what happens if they intermingle? Then would you have to come up with a new set of regulations for the new hybrid wolf?
Well, it's probably a little more complicated than that, and at this point, it would be really unfair to the recovering Mexican wolf to put them in a situation to have that hybridization. There are very few. This is a very small source population they started with, and there's the risk of genetically swamping this new species. So, or this mixture of these northern wolves and these Mexican wolves. Really, the best thing for these wolves now is to get them recovered as this subspecies down in an area that is historic to them, with historic food bases and historic habitats that they evolved on, not in these northern habitats with entirely different prey bases, vegetation covers, and those, and potentially with a genetic mixing.
That leads us to a good point. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back with the county seat. We're talking about Mexican wolves versus Canadian wolves and what league they're going to be in. Got a couple of good questions. When we return, we'll be back in just a minute.
Kanab, base camp for your southern Utah adventures. You belong in Kanab.
What would you do with an extra day in Utah Valley? Explore the Wasatch Mountains? Snap a family photo at Bridal Veil Falls. Cool off on Utah Lake or the Provo River. No matter what you're searching for, you can find it in Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
ATV? Check. Four-wheel driving? Check. Bouldering? Check. Mountain biking? Check. Hiking? Check. River rafting? Check. Adventure is about more than just crossing activities off of a list, but hey, if you can find a place that gives you everything you're looking for, all the better. In Emery County, you'll find the San Rafael swell, trails, lakes, and the small-town hospitality you're looking for. San Rafael Country, in the heart of Utah. Visit us and check something off your list.
The Utah Farm Bureau has always been there to fight for the needs of its members, with discount programs on items ranging from vehicles and ATVs to health and wellness. The membership fees aren't big, but the results are. We've been around since 1916, and we're not leaving anytime soon. Utah Farm Bureau. We work for those who work to feed the world.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking about wolves again. Conversation, if you're out there in the wildlife community, is that they are looking at expanding yet further the Mexican wolf habitat and trying to reintroduce them up into the Four Corners area. You said something, Greg, very interesting that I thought about, because we were talking about if the gray wolf meets the Mexican wolf and they sign a peace treaty, you're going to have a hybrid species on your hand. And you said something that kind of slipped by, but it really was an interesting thought. You could overwhelm the species. How would that be?
Well, again, you have a very tight genetic pool. The Mexican wolf is a little bit different size, a little different coloration, and it is a unique subspecies. The way to recover any species is to not, and keep it pure, is to allow that species to continue to habitate in its own areas with its own prey bases without injecting an entirely different subspecies of wolf. So those who have a pure love of this species should ask that it not have an opportunity to be genetically interchanged. Some may say, historically, was there a little bit of genetic interchange between these northern wolves and Mexican wolves? And the truth is there probably was some, but it was very limited, and it was not, it didn't offer the potential to swamp a genetic pool of a very small population. You had these at the time when there may have been a little bit of that hybridization, you had wolves that went clear to the southern end of the country of Mexico. So they're very wide range, and it wasn't probably going to have any overwhelming effect on a gene pool.
So you're basically saying, this is really intriguing, you're basically saying that in an attempt to recover a species and maintain a pure species, you get its base too big, you get an interjection of another species and they crossbreed, you can actually kill off the species you're trying to preserve.
You could, done enough, and if there were enough of that, you could genetically extinct a species. That's possible in its purest form.
Wow. Now you said something, Bill, that really was very interesting to me, and I want to follow up on that. You said they caught a wolf, and it's been months later, and they still haven't determined whether it was a wolf. What? I mean, who cares? I'm sorry.
Well, you know, the difference between a purebred Canadian gray wolf and a hybrid is just that. If it's a hybrid, then it doesn't fall under the same species and regulations of the protected species or the listed species. And so therefore, if they can determine it was a hybrid, then there's less consequences, or then at least we know that there's hybrids out there and they're not a pure species out there, or there is a pure species, but there's also this hybrid as well. But it doesn't matter, either one of them kill wildlife, they kill livestock, kill our threatened endangered species such as the sage grouse and those type of things. So they both eat.
I was going to say, my question, who cares? Because if they're taking out livestock and you need to protect your livestock or your game base, then you need to manage the species. And so why are we spending all this time trying to prove who they are?
Well, if it was out of the management area, and it was not, it was determined that it was a hybrid wolf versus that a purebred wolf, the consequences of taking that wolf, the trapper, i.e. the trapper, of taking that wolf would be different than it would be different as a hybrid than it would be as a purebred reintroduced wolf. So there's some different guidelines there, and that's why it has to be determined.
You know, and maybe I could play a little bit off of what you both talked about. What are these things eating? And in Utah, we've worked, you know, for over 100 years to recover our game species, our wildlife species. That, you know, they were virtually obliterated from man, from predators, a number of things. But we've worked to bring these back throughout our state. We've got, you know, wonderful trophy elk herds and bighorn sheep herds and bison herds and deer herds. Those are very valuable to the citizens of the state. Those are a source of recreation from both hunters, wildlife watchers, and those who want to know that we've got recovered wildlife on the landscape. Introducing a non-native wolf into Utah and presuming that it's okay to say, well, this wildlife base that's been created should be consumed by this non-native wolf that came in, really isn't fair to the broader set of citizens of the state. Sure, there's some who would like to have those wolves there, but this isn't the right or the natural way that we should go about recovering this species. Let's recover them in their habitat with the prey that they evolved on originally, not with what we've been working so hard to recover in the state, and as was mentioned, at the threat of her adversely affecting a livestock industry that candidly is struggling right now and doesn't need an additional predator.
Besides, you change their diet, they could end up with high cholesterol or something, you know. So I do want to ask another question, because typically, as I prepare to talk to, you know, come up with one of these shows and we meet to tape it, I tell people, what are you filming? And I say, well, we're going to do a thing on the Mexican wolf. And then I hear all kinds of things off the street. So one of the comments that I've had more than once in the last couple of weeks is somebody saying, well, yeah, we need to recover the Mexican wolf. He's got to move further north because of global warming. You know, is that really a problem? Is their habitat being destroyed at the south end of their native range because of the climate?
Well, whether or not and to what degree there's climate change is something that needs to be looked at over time. And maybe there could be some areas that eventually will not have sufficient habitat. But that that determination really hasn't been made. And to take this one species and say, here's a new way we're going to recover endangered species. We're going to move them all north, 1,000 miles or 500 miles. I don't see us talking about moving desert tortoise to Montana or the Florida panther to Pennsylvania or the American alligator to the Great Lakes. There may be changes over time, but those, we shouldn't falsely react and say, well, climate change has occurred, so let's move everything north 1,000 miles. That isn't good wildlife management, and it's really not being good stewards of the wildlife. And there's been no conclusion that this habitat that this species evolved in has been lost whatsoever. The Mexican government is very interested in a widespread recovery program in their country. They've come to America. In fact, the next recovery planning meeting that's being hosted by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will actually occur in the country of Mexico, because they want to talk about what can we do to recover our native species in our country first before you go do it in a non-native place in the United States. So I think we need to honor their request first before we sort of pull that out from under them.
Yeah, they could lose their citizenship if they got too many of them north of the border, I suppose. So, Bill, I want to ask you a question. Financially, what kind of impact has the gray wolf had on ranchers? I mean, you know, can you take any stories, any samples of your neighbors or anybody up north in Rich County? And, you know, when a piece of livestock goes down, how much does that set a rancher back?
Well, of course, it depends on what the livestock was. If it was a young calf, not nearly as much impact as if it was a full-grown cow, or even a breeding. It could be a purebred or a purebred bull, for example. But no matter how you look at it, those losses are there. And sometimes they're inconclusive. I mean, sometimes it's kind of like, well, we really can't determine whether that was a wolf or not. But to a rancher who's running livestock, there's a dead animal there, there's some loss there, and whether it's inconclusive or not, he's suffered some loss. And so, you know, you try to rule out anything that's going to jeopardize your operation. And if you lose something, you lose it. And it's, you know, it cuts into your bottom line. And you know, we've been highs and lows, and we had a really good year last year, but we're in an all-time low back here again. And, you know, so a loss is a loss, and sometimes they're very substantial to a small operator, for example.
Great, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back with our closing thoughts on the county seat. Our topic today, the wolf.
Tucked away just outside of Cedar City, Utah, are two of southern Utah's best-kept secrets, Canaryville Falls and Kolob Canyons. The rare scenic views create beautiful backdrops to capture the perfect selfie. Get your selfie to Canaryville Falls or Kolob Canyons and get in on one of Utah's best-kept secrets. Go to visitcedarcity.com and access your adventure.
There is a place where looking out means looking in, where an impression lasting only a few seconds will be imprinted on a life forever, where courage is forged and innocence rediscovered, where remembering is rewarding and forgetting unforgettable. There is a place where truth is felt and where seeing is believing. There is a place.
Shopping in Davis County has never been better. Experience Station Park, Northern Utah's premier gathering place for shopping, dining, and entertainment. With over 100 shops, Station Park is something for the whole family. Or explore the shopping possibilities this season under one roof at the Layton Hills Mall. Both are conveniently located north of downtown Salt Lake, just off I-15. Come take advantage of special discounts and a wide selection of stores. Visit playindavis.com for more info.
Let's be honest, you don't know much about Beaver County. Well, let me tell you about it. It's the birthplace of outlaw Butch Cassidy and inventor Philo T. Farnsworth. Some of the best skiing in Utah is at Eagle Point. You've got camping, Canyon Breeze Golf Course, Crusher and the Tushers, Beaver Territorial Courthouse, snowmobiling, renewable energy, Pioneer Car Show, Squeaky Cheese, ghost towns to explore, best water in the country, Paiute ATV trails, Old Frisco kilns, horse races, hunting, fishing, and it's a good place to live. Beaver County, mountains of fun. I could tell you more, but why don't you come and see it for yourself?
Welcome back to the county seat. Our topic today about Mexican wolves and the possibility that they may be expanded into southern Utah as part of an extended range. So, Greg, what does this recovery look like? I mean, let's lay it out. I see that boundary where they're already expanded almost up to the Utah border down there in Arizona. If they expand it further, what's the impact going to be?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, first of all, wildlife and livestock, you know, our top two concerns. Then the concern of, you know, are we trying to recover a non-native species in a completely different habitat with a completely different prey base? But mostly what it does is it's a lot of folks out there who are very passionate. They'd love to see wolves back in Utah, but the Fish and Wildlife Service, we need to count on them, and we'll continue to pressure them to make the right decision. They're going through a recovery planning process now, probably be concluded potentially by the end of the year. We want to ensure that that recovery planning process includes the country of Mexico, where 90% of their historic habitat occurred, and that they're first doing all they can in that place. There's no need to reach into Utah and Colorado and these northern New Mexico and northern Arizona. There's no need for that now till we've really fully exhausted all of the mechanisms. That will help the species, it'll help the ranching community, it will help the sportsman enthusiasts. Let's do this right. Let's not create false science in order to achieve some undefined objective or recovery for something that really needs to be done properly.
Okay, and it just has something running through my head. Last year you had a northern gray wolf make it clear down to the Grand Canyon and caught a bus back to Beaver County. A rancher could take that one out. If that reverse happens with a Mexican wolf, what's going to happen to the rancher?
Well, a rancher, even in Beaver County, you know, isn't allowed to take that out. That one, the Fish and Wildlife Service determined was an accidental take. But certainly, let's say a Mexican wolf journeyed all the way into Rich County, Utah, in a delisted area, very impactful. If a rancher up there inadvertently was protecting his livestock in a legal means and took out a Mexican wolf, certainly they'd be subject to, you know, the full wrath of the Endangered Species Act and what may occur there. So that's certainly not a situation that would be good for anyone.
Farmer to felon in 30 seconds. Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much. This has been a very interesting topic. We probably should discuss it some more. Greg, you keep us posted on how the Fish and Wildlife Service proceeds with this.
I'll do it.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us into your homes each week. Thanks, panel, for showing up for this conversation. Remember, local government is where your life happens. Be part of the solution. Be involved. We'll look for you next week on the County Seat. If you'd like to share this video with your friends, well, you do that right here. If you would like to subscribe to our YouTube channel, you do that over here. If you'd like to interact with us on the County Seat, that happens over here. If you want to watch the next episode of the County Seat, you can catch it Saturday night at 11 or Sunday morning at 8:30 on ABC4 Good for Utah.